Already, this is going to be my final update on the topic of coronal mass ejections, or actually, I can't say or because and and solar flares or solar flares and coronal mass ejection. So a couple of edits or uh, like I made some mistakes in the previous video. It seemed like when I was talking about one, I equated it with the other, which is not the case. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. Then I said there's no classification for either, because again, I was equating one with the other. It seems like there's a classification for solar flares, but I didn't see one for coronal mass ejections just yet. Maybe one exists. I also made mistakes whereby I equated. I spent I spent a fair bit of time thinking about. I was talking about sentinels and thinking about getting signals across. But the thing is that coronal mass ejections can travel quite relatively slowly compared to the speed of light. So according to this page on the, I believe, University of Illinois, I don't know if this is official, but this page highlights that the magnetic shock wave can take 18 to 36 hours to reach Earth. So there's a variance, and it's not minutes, but it's it depends what we're talking about. We're talking about a flare. Are we talking about a CME? I still have to do due diligence to be able to really separate the two, understand the rate at which they can travel, as well as the impacts that they will have. Okay, so that being said, here's the link to the core difference between the solar flares and the coronal mass ejections. Again, I'm not sure this is 100% accurate, but this website saying that solar flares are relatively small and local, taking place in the lower atmosphere near sunspots where magnetic field lines are concentrated. Um, yeah, well, that's what the evidence suggests so far. And I read somewhere else that sunspots in particular could be an indicator of an upcoming solar storm. Now we gotta then get into the classification of what ought to be classified as a solar storm. Is it a combination of sunspots leading to solar flares, eventually becoming coronal mass ejections, or like what are the set of precepts that lead to certain outcomes? So those are the kind of questions I'm interested in. But but yeah, it's not all minutes. It's not all it's not that everything travels at the speed of light. There is a core distinction. Yeah, so I spoke about the classification. This would be uh, dot 0001, and well, you can do the math here. Um, Exponentials are not a area of uh, expertise for me. Uh, but the flux would uh, uh, occur at the rate of that many picometer watts per square meter. So if a solar flare was coming towards Earth, then contingent on how much, I don't know how you actually measure this, but according to the Wikipedia site, the classification system for solar flares uses the letter according to the peak flux in watts per square meter of X-rays with wavelengths 100 to 800 picometers, as measured by the Earth by the following spacecraft. Okay, so this part is talking about further classifications, whereby you have M M5, with this you have M4 as well, and then X you have X1, X2, and so forth. There was a previous classification system that's highlighted here. The next link is, this is something that popped up more recently. It looks like there was an X-class event um, just, yes, 2 days ago. A major X-class solar flare just landed into Earth via Forbes. A couple of websites, two websites have reported that. So that would be in this range. Um, I read one of these articles. I read this one, and they said this one caused disturbances over the Atlantic Ocean. So this was the map of how this solar flare in this particular case impacted Earth. So this region looks like, generally speaking, over the Atlantic Ocean. And so I think the article says it created some disturbances over, yeah, well, sorry. Well, these rays travel toward the speed of light, colliding with the top of our atmosphere and causing a shortwave radio blackout. Over the Atlantic Ocean and coastal regions. There's a map where radio operators may have noticed weirdness around this time frame. Ready? Okay. So yeah, this link is about what does it take to be an expert. I don't think I've read this article. I started going through it, but I need to move on to other things at this point and let somebody else handle this. This article, I read this article today. I found it to, at least from my uneducated perspective, there's a lot of value. It's a very comprehensive article. It packs a lot of information in a short like segment, uh, and it, I think it does a fair job from my very uneducated perspective. It gives a historical context, what happened with the Carrington event, named after astronomer Richard Carrington, who observed the event first, and then over the following hours, 17 hours to be precise, the effects were recorded and experienced. Um, Telegraph was the means to be able to communicate at that time, so disruption was experienced. The telegraph system may not even have been hooked onto a power source, but it was doing this, which means that there was sufficient enough charge in the environment uh, to interact with the machinery of how our telegraph machines work, if I understand correctly. It from a historical context, because the article talks about how prepared are we for the next giant solar flare, it then gets directly into um, what, like, defining the problem. So, like from statistical analysis, it talks about how sun's fairly quiet, but every once in a while, it starts emitting a steady stream of particles, and it just kind of builds up on the what kind of temperature are we looking at? Uh, Sorry, and not in terms of emissions, but just like just the physics around what's going on the surface at the very least. Uh, Talks about sunspots. Um, so it's basically talking about how the energetic particles can be sent towards Earth. Now, then it talks about under normal circumstances, these particles are relatively slow moving, taking about 3 days on average to reach Earth's distance from the sun. Uh, tend to miss Earth since they are fairly localized in space and the odds of striking precise locations are low. So some of the things I kind of discussed in the previous set of videos. Um, the relative size of the sun, the relative size of Earth, where Earth is with regards to where a flare or coronal mass ejection may be happening. So it's not necessarily facing towards Earth at the same time. And the third one is even if they do hit the Earth, our planet's magnetic fields tend to funnel them harmlessly away, perhaps except for down around the poles where they can create the beautiful and spectacular aurora. So when these charged particles do come towards us, basically saying that the Earth's natural, like occurring magnetic field will funnel them away. So if you look at the simulations for what this subpoint is talking about is basically have a magnetic field around the Earth, we believe is generated through the core, which I hypothesize is the core is solid and it's spinning, if I understand correctly, if I remember correctly. I still wonder if the core is solid, how is it spinning inside? Is it spinning because the Earth is spinning on its axis? And so the core is spinning on the inside too? I could be wrong about this. But yeah, I believe the spinning of the core creates the magnetic field. And with this magnetic field, when it gets hit by these charged particles, makes me want to like spend more time learning about what the charged particles are actually comprised of. What is their core composition? Is it mostly a series of protons? And the protons, they're protons because the other particles, it was the protons got separated from the other particles in the atomic structure, whatever was going on in the sun. So I'm making a lot of assumptions here, but yeah, it at the very least makes me wonder like why protons? But anyway, so like when they say charged particles, I'm thinking the protons are hitting this magnetic field, and I don't know what's happening in terms of the interactions, but the particles, like the subpoint says, tend to get funneled away. So this is the magnetic field here. The particles kind of go around, and depends on the severity of the event. The article says, importantly, the particles themselves pose no danger to biological organisms on Earth's surface, like us. But that doesn't mean we're immune to any ill effects that might ensue. I guess again, I don't know what that really means. I would have liked a little bit more clarity. Makes a whole bunch of questions like like it depends on the severity of the issue and what's happening with the magnetosphere itself, the levels of radiation that may seep through the magnetic field, if that's even a good way of thinking about this. I guess it really depends on the severity of the issue. Right? Now, this is an important point. I personally think this is an important point that they mention here. The author says, if everything lines up exactly the wrong way, the outcome can be disastrous. Now, I would like some probability around a statement like this. Like, what are we really talking about? Like, I would have liked to see the math behind something like that. But like, I would have spent a fair bit of time on wrangling something like that. But I still like some clarity. Like, what does this really mean? This part continues. If a solar flare causes a coronal mass ejection, and if that coronal mass ejection is high in energy, and if the particles from its head, uh, and if the particles from it head directly for Earth, and one more thing, if the magnetic field of the ejected material and the magnetic field of Earth are anti-aligned, that's a recipe for maximum damage to our planet. Infrastructure, electronics, and a whole lot more. That's almost certainly what happened 162 years ago when the now famous Carrington event occurred. When did Carrington occur? Oh, that's something else. Okay, I'll get to that in a bit. Okay, Carrington happened 160 years. 60 years. Okay, so let's dissect what they're talking about here. And I'll use what color should I use so that it's neutral, doesn't influence what we're talking about here. I'll just use light blue for now. I would, no, actually that would influence it. Okay, I'll just use black. Okay, so there's a couple of pieces here. So first of all, the solar flare has to cause a CME. Okay, so it goes back to the distinction. Looks like again, solar flare would, I would think, mostly be localized. So the CME that we really got to watch out for. I think, I'm not sure. It has to be high in energy, right? So it goes back to the classification of the solar flare, I would think. The solar flare has a classification. The solar flares result into the CME. So depending on what kind of solar flare we're observing, the coronal mass ejection that's created as a consequence will carry that amount of energy within them. At least that's my extrapolation of this. I can be wrong. If the particles from it head directly for Earth, which I've spoken about today in earlier videos, and one more thing, if the magnetic field of the ejected material and the magnetic field of Earth are anti-aligned. So yeah, I still don't like understand this 100%. That would be a lie. So why would it be anti-aligned? Okay, so if yeah, well, so Earth is spinning on its axis, right? The axis is slightly tilted. So if this is the core, I actually don't know the answer to this. This is an assumption I'm making, is that the magnetic field has something to do with how the Earth is tilted on its axis. One that may not be two, the two may not be interdependent. I don't want to do a Google search right now, but when we visualize something like this, we visualize that, well, this is Earth, right? And this is the sun here. So let's say something's coming towards Earth. It's going to take 17, 20 hours, something like that. Now, I think what they're talking about is, I'm not going to draw the axis actually. So if the magnetic field could be like this, right? Or it could be like this, right? So that's what they're conceptually, I can understand what they're talking. I think that's being said in this thing. But what I don't understand is how would that really work? Okay, well, I guess like magnets and like magnets. If you look at the magnets, when you try to like a magnet has a field, and when you take those magnets that are slightly curved that come out of the batteries or the motors, when you it's how they behave when you bring them close to each other. So okay, so conceptually I can understand what they're talking about, but it's still, yeah, my physics is weak for me to be able to like really understand what a bad alignment would look like, what a negative alignment would look like, and maybe there's another way that this thing could be solved, because instead of the deflect, destroy, or harness aspect, maybe something can be done in regards to harness by not just putting shields up somewhere, but maybe putting some electromagnetic structure that does something with the way the particles that are coming, and instead of something just being like some kind of stupid structure in this form of a wall or something, you can make it a little bit more intelligent, whereby it can not just exist somewhere, but it can change its position uh, to create a field of sorts. Again, promise and peril. I don't know. This is probably in the domains of taking steps to become a type 2 civilization. So time will tell what humans will choose to do. But anyways, that's another one of the thoughts I was just thinking. Okay, so anyways, coming back to the article, I'm gonna clear this out. The article continues that that's things were exactly aligned the wrong way back during the Carrington event in the 1800s, I believe. And these are the four things that happened. This I think is the heart of this article. This really gets to the core of what are the set of things that happen for a CME to become uh, problematic, to say the least. Wait, there's somebody talking about the Carrington event. Uh, like I shared earlier, Richard Carrington noticed this event, and 18 hours later, uh, the typical solar flare travels at a particular speed. This travels, like I said, a little faster, 2 to 4 times. The largest geomagnetic storm in recorded history occurred. These are some of these symptoms that were experienced. I shared this earlier by the telegraph system. The article continues, the physics behind this is both simple and, if you think about it, terrifying. The charged particles that are emitted from the sun and strike the Earth's atmosphere aren't themselves harmful, as the atmosphere has outstanding stopping power. But these particles, when they move in large numbers and at high speed, will create their own magnetic fields, like any electrical current. If these magnetic fields are strong enough, they can substantially change the local magnetic field at Earth's surface. And if you change the strength and or direction of a magnetic field that passes through a loop or a coil of wire, that changing magnetic field will induce an electrical current. Well, magnetism and electromagnetism, right? So that's like pretty basic. Okay, I don't know if I'm thinking about this right, but there are videos on the internet where you have a coil and you take a magnet and you put that magnet through the coil. And as you put that magnet through the coil, the process of just putting the magnet through a copper coil creates electricity. And the fields that are created as such are resulting into that magnet being pushed through the coil. If you connect one end of the coil to the other, the thing will keep on going in that loop till, I guess, the magnet loses its effect. I don't know when that will be, but so that's what they're talking about, I guess. Now, Earth in this case would be that, I would think, coil. It would be I don't know what Earth would be in this case, but Earth has a magnetic field, right? And as the particles hit Earth, uh, the strength of that magnetic field would, I'm thinking, get less, and the direction may have fluctuations. I don't know if I'm reasoning soundly about this. This resulting change will induce an electrical current. So when the charged particles hit the magnetic field on Earth, they're creating current, which I believe is why we see the aurora. And if that current is now being produced in the atmosphere, that current will interact with every other electrical component in that vicinity. Again, I don't know if I'm reasoning about this right, but if that is true, then this makes sense that there will be flux that will be experienced in a local region. And suffice to say, any electrical or electromagnetic component within that region will experience uh, disturbances. Um, let's continue. The author says if you have a loop or coil of wire where the magnetic field changes inside, it will create and induce electric current. Faraday discovered this back in 1833. The world has changed a lot since Carrington's day. S, X, Y, and Z, and more are full of loops and coils of wire. So, so, so I don't know if this is true because this article was written in, would be nice to put dates here. Maybe, oh, the date was right here. The Zoom panel was hiding it for me. Okay, so this article was written this year. It's not, it was written an awfully long time ago. Um, so I saw this clip on, I'm tired. Let me, yeah, I'm going with that. I'm not super prepared for this, as I've shared. This is not something I'm looking into on a full-time basis. So I'm not dropping hours and hours looking at something like this. But let me try to bring up what I am thinking about, or I noticed. So Real Engineering is a YouTube page that I stumbled across. They have a video published last year. It's called The Grid versus the Next Big Solar Storm. So hopefully, it doesn't pop up right now. Unfortunately, it does. I'm just gonna try to skim this. So in this article, the author or the presenter breaks down like what exactly are we going to be dealing with and how best to prevent against something like this. So one of the things they talk about is that the grid is by and large for vast sections of the grids on Earth, it is using legacy components whereby The means and ability to be able to have fail-safe or switches in general may not exist. He was talking about really simple things like um, I think he was talking about microcontrollers, or uh, I don't want to say something that's wrong. Um, but basically, the presenter was talking about, I believe, the reality that if a surge was happening in the grid, and because of the legacy components, there doesn't seem to be, I could be wrong about this, so somebody else should watch this video, form your own judgments, specifically if you have an engineering or science background, or you understand these concepts really well, or just have a better understanding compared to me. But he was basically talking about if the electrical current is induced because of the uh, solar activity, one starts interacting with the grid, that may cause a surge, and it may, I believe, fry out certain components. But should that were to happen, there should be means that are able to um, have certain mechanisms. So you could either just shut the thing component down. You could have the excess energy ground. He doesn't talk about that. I found that in another article. I think either this one or this one. I'll get to that. Um, but yeah, the solution seems relatively, I think, simple. But I don't know what percentage of the Earth's grid doesn't have the provisions that this presenter is talking about. It seems like doing this kind of the kind of recommendations this individual was making through real engineering would be a lot more uh, uh, economically feasible versus the cost of not doing the work. I don't want to say any more about this because I didn't watch this video and my focus was full. Let's put it that way. So this is a 30-minute video. I think if this is an interest topic of interest to you, I really think you should watch this. Because in another segment of the same video, the presenter was talking about the fact that the risk from something like a solar storm is blown out of proportions. And based on this author, the luck. Yeah, I don't like. I should. I'm going to stop talking about this. But these are some of the things they talk about, and they're coming at it from an electrical, sorry, a physics perspective, and it's best if you watch this. So let's go back to the article from Forbes. The article from Forbes continues. Yeah, so at this point, they're talking about what the power companies, well, they're talking about if a Carrington level event happened, then it will impact the grid negatively. They're then talking about the mitigation steps, um, talking about grounding, uh, power companies, if they do this, they put grounding equipment such as copper in, well, I guess the ground. It is stolen for its material value. Um, okay, so instead of grounding this, we now have underground power stations and substations. That would experience enormous induced currents that will typically lead to fires, followed by significant damage and destruction to our infrastructure. I don't understand electromagnetism really well, or just basics of electricity. I don't know why the underground power stations would experience induced currents, um, because I don't know what that means when you earth something. I've heard of this ever since I was a kid, and even when you're dealing with like hard disks and stuff like that, You always wear anti-static gloves or something. You take one end of the cord and you attach it to something so that the static doesn't impact the drive or the data within it. So you're grounding it to something. I guess in this case, if the discharge were to happen, then it would flow through that cable and into the chassis and down in the ground. I don't know. That's how I'm reasoning about this. I guess if you put substations and power stations in underground anyways, there will be no place for it to discharge the excess electricity. I think, I'm not sure if this is what they're really saying here. So they're saying as a result, as a consequence, this reality will lead to fires. Excuse me. I'm not going to question the fact that the author, I don't know if it's fair for me to make that assumption, because I may have made that thing in the correlation like that in the past as well. Nuclear has been my big worry. So that's like my biggest worry. If nuclear can be shut down safely. I still don't know what the answer to that is. Because I haven't done the time to be able to understand what are the set of steps that are required in order to be able to shut down a nuclear power plant safely for an extended time period. Like, how do you just stop the fission reaction cold, like within seconds? And cold was a metaphor, and you just, that's it, shut down. That you go home, right? However long this is gonna last for. Nobody has to sit there. We don't have to have anyone sitting there watching that thing. That's just it sounds like a recipe for disaster. I don't know how you shut these things down. That's my biggest worry. After the nuclear, as I've shared in my previous content, this is my other biggest worry. These are really a set of problems that are going to start. So the economic cost is going to come later. The first you got to deal with the nuclear aspect, and then this. Now, obviously, if you don't have any provisions for this, the cost is going to be much more than having some kind of insurance. So that, I guess, this figure depends on how big the event is and what it has an impact and what kind of events have triggered as a result of something like this happening in the first place. And you have the worst case, right? And you have the best case. Best case is, I would think the event that happened in Quebec is probably in the best case scenario. A couple of million people were out without power in Quebec when the event happened some 20 something years ago, something like that, 15, 20 years. But nothing other than that happened. I haven't looked at that issue in a lot of detail. So it's doing some correlation with temperature changes in an area where that may not be experienced. Now we're talking about statistics. The Carrington event was not some massive outlier that only occurs once every few million years either. Many solar flares have struck Earth, some of which have caused localized damage to the power grid. It's talking about a particular set of events. So a storm from 1972. Disaster disruption, and even caused the accidental detonation of naval mines in Vietnam. I don't know what naval mine is, but somehow the electricity would have impacted the mines and caused them to detonate. 1989, complete outage of Quebec's electricity system, which we were just talking about it. 2005, solar storm knocked the GPS network offline. Wow. I don't know if this was localized to some regions or global. These events may have been damaging, but they were only warning shots compared to what nature inevitably has in store for us. Again, would like some math to back up this statement with. Um, at the same time, we have only been monitoring the sun for a couple of hundred years. So I think what we really need to do here is look at the fossilized record of what happened beyond the 600 couple hundred year time span. And I, I'm gonna talk about this in a minute, but I just wanted to share that. And I guess I'm gonna talk about that next. So I'll just move that tab here. Um, so 2012, Sun did emit a solar flare that was as energetic as the one that caused the Carrington event. Um, it happened in the same plane as Earth's orbit, but missed us by the equivalent of 9 days. So, however, Earth's orbit is, um, so I guess what I don't understand is it 9 days ahead or was it 9 days later? Something would be one or the other. But if it happened ahead, then this event happened, and then we passed in the path of the event. And if the event happened here, and we all get past this area, and the event happened here, right? Had Earth been in the way, the global damage done could have crested the 10 trillion mark, not to mention the immeasurable loss of life that would have ensued. I spoke about this telescope in my previous videos. So this is the DKI solar telescope. To understand the scale, these are two individuals standing there in the background. I don't know if you can see them. Right here. I think these are two humans. Already, the article continues. Yet most of us don't think of solar storms the same way we think of hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions. In today's electronic, modern, reliant world, not exactly in that order, we should absolutely be thinking of this in terms of disaster preparedness. Talks about the DKI solar telescope. We're finally prepared to get some significant warning when a geomagnetic storm of disastrous proportions may occur. This is a really good article. However, I don't agree with everything that's said in this article because after watching this video, I don't know how to think about this because this article was saying the grid, sorry, this video is saying the impact to the grid, it's hyped up. I guess if I'm summarizing this right. Whereas this article is saying if Carrington level event did happen today or greater, the results would be catastrophic. Could be, right? So I really don't know who's right and for what set of reasons. The article continues. The solar telescope behaves as a sun measuring magnetometer, capable of measuring the magnetic field on the sun and in the solar corona. Allowing us to know whether an Earth-directed coronal mass ejection has exactly the wrong magnetic field for our planet at the moment. If one is detected, we have a chance to take large-scale mitigations, which include having power companies cut off the currents in their electrical grids, which takes gradual ramping down on the time frame of approximately 24 hours to do responsibly. There must be reasons why this takes 24 hours to do. Basically shut down the grid, if I'm reading this right. To disconnect and if possible, ground stations and substations so that large induced currents don't flow into homes, businesses, and industrial buildings, creating fires. So again, my physics is weak. I think this is saying that if the ground stations and substations are not grounded, that the electrical, I guess, discharge that's created because of the solar activity would flow through the ground stations and substations into the power lines and eventually wherever the power is going. So the grid's creating a certain amount of, or not creating, but channeling a certain amount of voltage. And if more energy is coming down, I don't know how watts and voltage, how this works, but basically you would have more voltage, I think. Basically you would have more energy going on the lines than is supposed to be there. And once this energy gets into wherever it's going, it's going to fry. It has a higher likelihood of frying whatever is wherever it's going. Right? Unless you have one of the thingies like I have, and I don't even know if that's going to work in a situation like that. And to issue recommendations for residents at home on how to safely cope, unplugging all the appliances and electronics, disconnecting certain wires and systems. Easy. Okay, well, unplug everything, go in the basement and pull out that big thing. Shut it down first. This is not actual recommendation. None of what I'm talking about in this video ought to be taken as actual advice. I am just thinking out loud. Please, please, please. I'm not an expert in any one of these areas. So don't take anything I say as a word of advice. But basically what they're saying here is, this is my interpretation, is again not a recommendation. The saying is to unplug everything and disconnect certain wires. I would disconnect the main thing. I would shut it off, shut off the main panel, wait 20 seconds, maybe longer, and then wear the protective covering, make sure I'm wearing shoes, grounded, take all the other precautions, and they're not wearing, not holding on the chain or anything like that. And I would pull that big thing coming from the wall and going into the unit, right? Something like that. Yeah, that's not actual advice. The fastest solar ever traveled from sun to earth made the journey in just 14.6 hours. Meaning that we'd ideally like a response time to be faster than that. Well, that's the fastest. And they were saying it takes 24 hours for the grid companies to shut down the 6 stations and substations. So you still have, like, I don't know how you're going to factor in that 20, sorry, 10, 9.4 hours, something like that. I did not have that. The greatest danger, however, comes in being completely unprepared, which is fairly close to the current state of affairs. Ooh, okay. So again, I don't know, like, who's right. Like, is the article on author on Ford right, or is real engineering, have they done their due diligence? Let's take a look at who wrote this article. Ethan Siegel, PhD astrophysicist, author, science communicator, who professes physics and astronomy in various colleges. Won various awards for science writing. Okay. Yeah, I have no idea who's right. Anyways, Ethan continuing. We have the beginnings with not only the DKI telescope, but the Parker Solar Probe and the sun monitoring satellites located at the L1 Lagrange points in space of the infrastructure necessary to detect and measure these events. But the requisite mitigations are not in place at all. So DKI telescope is there, the Parker Solar Probe. I don't know what that really does. And there are specific satellites that monitor the sun. Now, let's take a look at this. Parker Solar Probe. Parker Solar. Parker Solar Probe is the first ever mission to touch the sun. The spacecraft, about the size of a small car, travels directly overview. So on the final three orbits, Parker's Solar Probe flies within 3.8 million miles of the sun's surface. More than 7 times closer than the previous record holder for a close solar pass, the Helios 2 spacecraft, which came within 27 million miles in 1976, and about a tenth as close as Mercury, which on average is 36 million miles from the sun. So 36 million miles and 3.8 million miles. So this is 36 million miles. This is 100 and something, I think 136 million miles. So they're saying this is 3.8. The Parker Solar Probe is 3. It flies to within 3.8 million miles of the sun's surface, 3.8 million miles. So if I divide this up in 10 pieces, I guess, because Mercury is 36, yeah, roughly about 3.8, 36, 3.6, 36, 3.6. So I don't know if you can measure this. This was half. This was a fourth. Here. Fourth. Half. 36, 16, 8, 4. Wow. Wow, that's pretty crazy. The Parker Solar Probe is somewhere here. I don't know if you can see the other line, but I just drew a straight line. I would think this is somewhere, this is here, this is surface, so it's not accurate, but wow, that's pretty crazy. If I'm doing my math right, the Parker Solar Probe is somewhere here. Wow, that's pretty amazing that we have created machines that can go that close to the sun. And I don't know if it dies out, if it died out there, or if it's still operational. Um, I think that's quite astounding to be able to get, even in cosmic terms, that's a fair bit of distance. But um, even in that range, it's the temperatures in the domains of 13, almost 1400 Celsius. So that's hot enough to melt a lot of metals. And we have created a machine that can withstand the these temperatures. So let me clear out all the drawings and get rid of the annotation. And go back to, let me see if this is still active. I think the answer was on the following previous page. Launch date, manufacturer, field, and results. So is the Parker Soul probe still active? Let's go to Wikipedia. Hmm, that's pretty fast. What did human Parker do? Okay. There's another woman, American lady, um, who's, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people who study this phenomenon in particular, but um, I always check if it's recording because I don't want to record the whole thing again. But right now, I don't mind reading on the internet. I just do this because I may get some insights from somewhere else, or I would just learn about this more. Maybe somebody else is interested that who I know, and we could combine our efforts. Hmm, that's interesting. This is interesting. I think I understand what you're saying. Self-recognized spirituality. Okay, I don't understand what I just read, but I was thinking of my idea of the hard. This in this case it was just in the destruction domain of destroying the thing coming here with an electromagnetic impulse or something. But I'm going to surface level reading here. This could be used for measuring stuff. non-destructive evaluation, degradation of mechanical and magnetic materials. Anyways, I'm getting too sidetracked. I can't say I understand self-organized criticality as well. I totally do not understand what Stephen Wolfram was talking about in a new kind of science. That was the book. Just saw a lot of fractals and Mandelbrot. Um, yeah, I don't know if the new kind of science is more like it borrows from it from bit from John Archibald Wheeler. Um, that's the criticism of this model. I still don't understand like a new kind of science. Like if it's more like like it's more like saying it's an information theoretic model, or is how is this different from reductionism is my question. And yeah, I don't know. Getting too deep into this. Okay, well, I'm gonna pull out of there and when from seems like there may be a correlation for studying. I've grown with very little information, nanoflares and how they could potentially uh, predict the emergence of uh, coronal mass ejection, right? So, hey, all thanks to the hyperlink. The other thing I was going to look into going back from the article was we were here, somebody lost track. So Parker probe, everyone look for Lagrange points. So let's bring up some Creative Commons images first. Tools, unknown, and Creative Commons. Shouldn't everything be in Creative Commons in the scientific domain? Well, that's not the world we live in. But I can't do a very good job explaining this. This is Earth, I believe. This is this moon. There are multiple Lagrange points where gravity acts a little differently. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you could hypothesize space-time whereby mass is warping space-time, then you can see a big warp right here by the sun. But the Earth is also warping space-time around it. And so the Lagrange points are here, and they're here. You see like a little oval shaped thing here and here. And they're here in L3. And this is another way of visualizing this. L1, L2, L3, L4, L5. I don't know what the triangles indicate, different colors and different directions. Now, what are they? That's the question, right? Right. Let's take a look at that. Okay, at the Lagrange points, the gravitational forces of two large bodies and the centrifugal forces balance each other. This can make the Lagrange points an excellent location for satellites, as few orbit corrections are needed to maintain the desired orbit. Small objects placed in orbit at the Lagrange points are in equilibrium in at least two directions relative to the center of mass of the large body. Small objects placed at the Lagrange points are in equilibrium in at least two relative directions relative to the center of the large body. So are we saying if we put a small object here, 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 or here, that they will remain here? Hmm. This was the other question I had, which like, are the geosynchronous orbits just in one orbit, or are you all the way around 360? What is this guy saying? Ah, okay. The sun monitoring satellites located at the L1 Lagrange point. L1, here, here, this one. That makes sense because closer to the sun than us. So let's go back here. Where exactly is the Lagrange point L1 again? It's here. Okay, it's here. Earth is here. L1 is here. I have no idea what that means in terms of distance. But considering the fact that the solar event is not happening in minutes, it's more like hours. Some anomaly is going to be detected on the surface of the sun. Say we have some predictive system or something like that, like a large series of sunspots are being determined. I would question, like, why wouldn't you put something in L3 as well? Because that's necessary. Like the sunspot is actually facing. Oh, actually, I this is a very uneducated question, but I think my intuition is telling me that this not to sound all that, but my uneducated intuition is telling me that you want to just put like a solar monitoring satellite in just L1. You want to put it across. You want to put it in a variety of different orbits because. But the question is, well, let's Google this. Let's Google it. Why do we how long does it take for light to travel from L? Well, instead of seeing me trying to focus here with running on low sleep, you can just look at what I'm looking at. Um, Well, I'm not coming up with good data on actual light distance from one Lagrange point to another. So I'm going to do distance from Earth, and then I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to do that. If it works, then this. And we'll try and find an image that tells me the light distance. Nope, not that one. Nope, I don't want to click on that. I want to click on this one. That doesn't look like what I'm looking for. Well, I should do light distance, Lagrange point light distance from Earth. Man, Google is not helping today. Maybe I'm not searching for the right things. Lagrange point light distance is miles. How that means? How how can you be both 900 miles? Miles to it's gonna be like seconds, but um, it was 900,000. It's not that far. Yeah, I think we're going off on the tangent. This is where I made the mistake. I was just trying to find like what's the advantage of placing. It's not the distance so much; it's the view. I would think because the Lagrange points was one of the things that popped up mentioned. It allows, I forget the exact term, unaltered access to observing the sun. But I would just put one in L1. I think very uneducated guess, right? Okay, so that's what a Lagrange point is. Relatively stable. The centrifugal, the gravitational forces of both of the bodies cancel each other out. So things that get locked in there. If you place something there, it's going to remain there unless something happens, like a larger body goes through the solar system, something like that. Okay. Let's go back to the Forbes article. That was quite a detour, but they're saying that this exists, then this forms the components of the necessary structure or of the structure necessary to detect and measure these events, but the requisite mitigations are not in place. We talked about some of the other things. The author, Ethan, I forget the last name, mentioned in the worst case scenario, the flare would arrive during the cold snap. Continues. I'm going to skip through some of the details. The storage and distribution of food and water might be knocked out, leaving buildings to fend for themselves, as I've shared in previous content. Satellite systems could be knocked off as well. And gets into the details. Author says, if we fail to prepare, a single event could set us back decades as a civilization. There's a picture of two satellites colliding because we can't do the maneuvers, I'm guessing, which creates thousands of pieces of space debris, which that's a problem. But yeah, I think there's a term for this when the chain reaction happens. I forget. Maybe we were looking at this the other month, 2 months ago. We were looking at this, but we didn't go into a lot of details. The author continues. What do we do to prepare? Author recommends it starts with an early detection. It starts with early detection, ground-based and space-based observation of the sun and of the particles traveling from the sun to Earth. So let's write this down. That's recommendation number 1, according to Ethan, right? Then they're talking about what that would mean. And network of heliophysics observation of Earth. I Googled this earlier. I think this is a study of the sun. I think, if you want. At the L1 Lagrange points in space. And then close proximity to the sun itself. So that would be 1A, and that would be 1B. The examples of A1A would be the DKI telescope, and spelling mistakes on the vision. And an example of 1B would be the DKI. I'm not talking about Donna Karen International. Danielle something, and this one would be the Parker. Examples like Parker Solar Pro, right? Network of heliophysics observatories on Earth. Yeah. At the L1 Lagrange point in space. And I forget. So this would be one. This would be actually 1B, and this would be 1C. There's 3 things here. On Earth, at the Lagrange point, and in close proximity to the sun. So the Parker Solar, as we explored, goes pretty close to the sun. Next, they continue. We should prepare power grids for shutdown and disconnection that could take fewer than 14 hours, which makes total sense. Is what we the math. 24 hours for something. How many was it? 24 hours, right? Is that on average to get? No, 24 hours to shut down the grid, however that works, distributors or different things. I don't know how to know, North America, the world. Anyway, so 24 hours to shut down the grid, 14 hours on average. No, the fastest traveling CME, I think. No, travel within 14 hours. So you need to do this within less than 14 hours. So this would be number 2. These are all equally important. Then you're saying we should create mandatory safe mode orbits for satellites so that electronic disruptions won't be catastrophic, and create emergency plans for space. So this would be number 2. We should create mandatory safe mode orbits for satellites so that electronic disruptions won't be catastrophic. So I don't know what this means. Does this mean the satellites are in a particular orbit? There's something coming there, it's going to fry them. So instead of being in the path of the destruction, satellites kick in some maneuver to get into a safe mode orbit. I don't know if that's what it means. The other thing they're saying is create emergency plans for citizens in the event that a Carrington level flare occurs and head towards Earth. Yeah, this is a big problem if this happens. This is a colossal, going to be a colossal issue, because the first thing that comes to my mind is, again, I've spoken about this a fair bit, nuclear, big problem if you can't shut this down. Okay. In fact, let's save this picture. And you know, if you actually, let's stop this annotation for a second. If you actually look at the list of solar storms in recorded history, then there was something that happened uh, in 1967. According to Wikipedia, this is the link right here. I don't know if this is legit. Blackout of polar surveillance radars during the Cold War led U.S. military to scramble for nuclear war until solar origin confirmed. So miscommunication can happen, is what I'm saying. This was one thing. There was another event where a glitch appeared on the radar of a Soviet operator, and I don't remember the details of that, so it would not be fair for me to expand on that. But I think that was pretty, it could have been pretty bad, because the glitch was, I don't know what the chain of command was, if the person sitting there was instructed, if you're seeing something coming, then you should press the button as well. But I mean, somehow the saner minds, I don't know if it's good to use a Steven Pinker title, Better Angels Upper Nature, or I don't know what, like, you know, something, obviously the person did not press the button. So yeah, but this is what I noticed. I didn't go through all of this. There could be other stuff in here, but this 1967 height of Cold War, Americans thought that a nuclear war was happening, because the polar surveillance radars had gone dark. That just shows you how tense things have been. But to come back here, these are some of the recommendations. Yeah, I was talking about emergency plans. So nuclear would be one, and I've shared my thoughts here. I've even explored the other very, I guess you could say, however you want to look at it, the ET angle to this. I'd say if there is evidence that there's some weird or unexplained activity around nuclear power plants, weapons installation, and propulsion systems, then at the very least that warrants a question why those installations versus all the other installations in the world. That's my take. You got to use evidence and reason to dissect through the problem. In this case, I'm going to go with a random order today: power, propulsion, and weapons. Although this is what I'm really personally. Well, all three, but this and this, something goes bad, it's going to be really bad. This is not a comprehensive list. I am coming at it from a very uneducated perspective, but the first thing is safe shutdown here. Safe shutdown, right? The other thing is the next in pair all these activities that are in parallel is people on life support systems, because if the power goes out, the generators are going to kick in, and people on life support are that's the biggest thing, uh, in my opinion. Um, so what happens when the generator runs out, right? What's the plan? And this is a wide spectrum of patients in the hospitals and also in the residents, people on life support at their own residence, big problem. Um, I'm also thinking like I don't want to say smaller issues, but what's going to happen with things like pacemakers? Um, what's going to happen with cyborgs? I mean that they are cyborg amongst us today. People with cerebral like with different neurological ailments have electrodes in their brain that help stabilize their nerves, or folks receiving deep brain stimulation. What's going to happen with their components? How is their lives get impacted? Could they receive a shock and have a stroke as a consequence? I think these are all serious questions. Um, um, so yeah, I think it starts from like the emergency plan will start here. It will then evolve into, not evolve, but all of these are by themselves. So this is 4A, and these are going to happen. Like there's like a plan that's going to be needed on a concurrent basis. Now we're talking about water, right? Uh, there's also a huge communication angle to all of this, because if an event like this is happening, then you don't want this to go off. This is the big problem. You want this to be shut down safely, and you don't want these to go off. Like like that happened in the 67. Um, there was a mystery. Like I shared the link. So a lot of nation states are not haven't entered the space age yet. They may have entered the weapons age, particularly nuclear weapons, but they may not have entered the space age, even if it's from the perspective of creating the necessary um, infrastructure to have data coming in from a variety of different streams. So from the sun, from different planets, or working with the existing space agencies. Then I don't know how the space agencies talk to institutions like NORAD or other DoD. I don't know if NORAD is a DoD, falls under the domain of DoD, but there could be other DoD institutions. And then DoD institutions around the world talk to each other, which I'm hoping most of them talk to each other. I know that, like, starting with some of the larger institutions, that American and the Chinese militaries have an ongoing dialogue and discussion. And the question is if the same is the case with uh, all the nation states that have nuclear capability. Because if there is no open line of communication, that could be a really bad thing. So that's the thing that scares me the most, is some miscommunication happens on the 1967 level, and instead of saner minds prevailing, it derails from that point onwards. So I think you need to think about these things in advance and make sure that there are very clear plans and processes and communication channels in place if an event like this were to happen. And there should be redundancies. So uh, what if the internet has blackouts, right? What if you can't send an email to the person who you're supposed to reach out to? Then what do you do in this situation like that? I think we should expend a lot of time thinking about it. So I would say all of these again are equally important. Um, I think this is the main thing. I could be very wrong about all this. Life support in parallel, getting water to individual. How long is the This is a big if, right? But or actually, I don't know how big of an if it is. How will we get water to humans for days, weeks, months, maybe on end? Uh, how because the water is pumped to the houses right now, and with the pumping stations down, then how is the pumping station is going to be brought back online? That's the big question. First of all, how will food be delivered if we are inherently dependent upon the grocery uh, stores? If the grocery stores are not getting food supplies, then what's going to happen? I think this is a so it starts with, I think it starts with like that, water, food, a means to be able to communicate with the population, because people are going to be feeling anxious thoughts, right? So I'm just going to say calms for now. Um, how will that happen? Because civilization evolved in the framework of like nation states and cities. Nation states like provinces, states, but the national structure then goes down to the municipal level, cities and towns. So it's not uncommon for um, like a variety of different um, clusters or kinds of governments. So you could have state, and then you could have municipal, which would be city, I believe, and then you could have sub-regional, like councilors and stuff. Uh, I barely see the number of like different politicians here. Um, so I would question, and I'm not coming in this funny. I'm just stating the facts. Uh, I question that leadership will have the means and ability to be able to communicate with the wider population. So if the electrical component is out, then how will people connect with each other? I think this would be, actually, I don't know. Um, yeah, I'll just put the question out there. How will communication happen in reality when the internet's flaky and TVs are out, TV stations are out, radio's out? Oh, I guess radio would work, right? But how would you power the radio station? That's the question. What if the radio stations are impacted? So food, water, homes, life support, safe shutdown in areas that could experience big problems. Um, security is going to be a big one. Security is going to be a big one. So this is why inclusion is so important in society. Because if people, this is my take, I could be wrong, people feel included and part of the library community, then I personally think the chances of something bad happening are substantially lower. It's not a scientific um, observation. This is just my very uneducated guess. And when coronavirus situation first started, we saw some looting happen. This also happened with the LA riots. I'm talking about North American context. Things like this may happen somewhere in other parts of the world often if there's a breakdown in the security structure. Um, this is a wider conversation with regards to um, how surveillance ought to be enabled, and what are the ethics with regards to how it should be enabled, whether reforms are needed in that domain, whether it be a transparent society via data print or like a surveillance system, surveillance system to what's the guy's something man, Steve Mann, I think, from University of Toronto. Came up with this concept of the surveillance, whereby individuals are monitoring each other, something like that, like is not a really comprehensive centralized form of surveillance that has been architected. And transparent society obviously could be everything. So I think security is going to be a big. I think we need to invest in these things now so that there isn't a breakdown of security if a significant event were to happen. Because right now, there's a variety of different ways why people behave, and I believe the culture again is paramount. And first and foremost, people behave a way because they've been conditioned to behave that way from birth, pretty much. And there's a huge education and cultural. I don't know what I'm talking about at this point, if there's even such a thing. Cultural upbringing element to this. So, helping develop that character for the individual citizen, in my opinion, it should be of the paramount importance. I think programming has such a pivotal role to play here, all the way from children's programming to how we grow as children, to teenagers and adults, and the kind of programming we receive really molds our perception of the world around us. And I was very lucky, like I somehow like kind of programming got to me. I'm not trying to sound all that I'm all this, but I think nobody's perfect. I've made some big mistakes in my interpersonal dynamics, but I believe like when it comes to issues of ethics, I think about these things a fair bit. I may have made some mistakes in the past, but fortunately, I think the issues have been few and far between. But yeah, I think the issue of receiving the right kind of programming. I had the mentors in the form of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Sesame Street, growing up as a kid, and a lot of those values stuck with me. And I believe that this is the need for the future, because the programming will really determine how individuals behave during peaceful times and also during potentially turbulent times. And I also think the huge added, well, there's so many benefits in investing in the culture building activities. And if you trust in the people and create the right dynamics for them to thrive and prosper, then it's just so much better. And in a situation where the lights are indeed out, it can be a calm event. People are hunkering down, connecting with each other, taking care of each other, um, and going from there. Um, yeah, so it need not devolve into a terrible fiasco, is what I'm saying. But yeah, anyways, to come back to this, these are comprehensive uh, set of activities that would need to happen for the emergency plans to get created. Orders are going to uh, be enabled, what kind of plans are going to be initiated, what kind of planning is happening right now. Plans are useless. Planning is indispensable. President Eisenhower said that. Um, how will those plans be communicated? What provisions are going to be in store in order to execute upon those plans? How, again, will those instructions be broadcasted through the different chain of command? How will the citizens be engaged? Will the state take the brunt of the contingency plans and how they ought to exist, or is it going to be a combination of private and public institutions, or something else? I don't know if that's something else would be. Um, yeah, there's going to be a fair bit of work required to enact the emergency plans. And this has to be a richer plan in regards to doing different kind of scenario planning. So if X percentage of the grid is indeed out. What does that really mean? The specific components fried to the point of they cannot be repaired anymore. So then you have spares located somewhere in some nuclear bunker, former nuclear bunker somewhere, where they would be shielded against the radiation. Well, I would think like if they're not plugged in, they should be okay, but I'm not also not sure. So, how do you get those components from those sites and install them at a particular location? How do you find the workforce to do that? How do you scale that workforce? How does that workforce get adequately compensated? How do you factor in the time that workforce can be away from their families for an extended duration because they're going to be working to basically reconnect everyone? And this is I'm not gonna do my whole like I believe people working in grocery stores are horribly compensated for their energies because we have learned in COVID that without the grocery store individuals, people working in the grocery store, people like COVID would have been a lot much worse, and we still pay people who work in grocery stores minimum wage, and the same for a lot of other jobs, which are crucial and critical, but it's not welcome. Hey, I just got a comprehensive list here. I think this is just the start, but like I think it says somewhere in this article too. Yes, it is. Yeah, that provisions and in regards to the time we expend in order to prepare for events like this go would contribute to the, the, the quality and as it relates to executing upon that. Right? Okay, the article concludes, and I'm getting some ads here. I'm not interested. In a very real sense, the danger is definitely coming. Again, I don't know if this is true or not. We gotta put this author together with this individual in a room and let them hash this out. The author continues. It's only a question of when. If we do, then the author, if we do nothing to prepare, when the big one hits, we can look forward to trillions of dollars worth of infrastructure damage and quite possibly an enormous number of deaths. But if we can prepare our power grid, distribution system, and global citizens to be ready for the inevitable, we truly have the capacity to effectively survive even a Carrington type event. We just need to make the effort and the investment in prevention. Otherwise, we will be paying for it many times over for years and even decades to come. So I don't know, like I don't know if somebody on this planet has looked into CME type event of a particular scale. So I don't know, just going back to the comments I made about the scenario planning and what kind of scenarios have been exercised or developed at the very least. I don't know what the probability of a Carrington type event is. I really don't know, right? So going back to the previous comments I made in my previous video, this is all coming from a very uneducated perspective. It all depends on the frequency of these events. Realizing the fact that we've only been measuring the sun for a couple hundred years. And in all likelihood, there probably have been many extreme solar events in the history of Earth, not the solar system. And this one of the things that could be done is to scale this mechanism to which the impact that solar flares have on the environment is something that's studied in a lot more detail. Here on Earth, in the ice core samples, maybe there's a fossilized record of it somewhere else. I don't know how that would actually come about, but I wonder if there's samples of this on the surface of Mars, particularly in the polar ice caps. Maybe in the rocks, I don't know, because I would think that the uh, that the surface of Mars has been largely untouched for hundreds of millions of years, if not billions of years. However, the actual geological processes are going about there with the wind, and maybe there's some geological activity there as well. Um, I said geological, but I mixed in atmosphere and so I think geology mostly has to do with the earth. But yeah, so like however the changes on Mars have contributed to that. There should be still trace of that in rocks um, in ice cores. But this is like based on a whole bunch of assumptions, right? That the ice cores have been there exactly in that spot for millions of years, and a million, hundreds of millions. But I don't know the answer to a lot of these questions. And if you do try to get a comprehensive picture, something like that, then how many points across a particular real estate would you have to sample? Like, do you have to sample half of the planet or a quarter of it? That seems like a favorite work. So I don't know if there's a clever way of doing something like that. But I think if you did do something like that, um, it would at the very least give us a better picture of what may have happened in terms of the sun doing its thing on a longer time stretch. And um, it just gives you that much more intelligence. I don't really know if that's going to be. I don't know how much more useful that's going to be with regards to be able to predict the next one, the one that could impact civilization. But I think that would be a start. I think I'm again, it's all uneducated uh, opinions. When I was looking at this list of solar storm, and like I shared, this list that says list of solar storms starts pretty much around 1582 and continues to this day. So I did another Google search and I typed extreme solar events from ancient times. I could also type like um, on a longer time stretch or something like that, or geological time, like something like more than the past couple hundred years. And according to this article, and we haven't verified this, I don't know which kind of research is backing up an article like this. But apparently, I think I shared this earlier, but a giant, there was a huge solar storm that hit Earth 2,600 years ago. And this was bigger than the Carrington event, according to um, um, this bit right here. So this article saying, based on radioactive abstract within ice in Greenland that suggests an enormous proton storm struck Earth in about 660 BC, one that might dwarf the Carrington event. So 1582 to now is 439 years. 660 BC to now would be 2680, 2680. Yeah, so almost 2,700 years ago, right? 2,700 years ago. So, I don't know. There are other timelines as well. Two other ancient proton forms, this time frame and this time frame. And the latter is the largest solar eruption to date. I'm just curious. Let's do this search. The latter, right? So what happened in, let's do a Google search with what happened during this time. Apparently the largest solar storm in history happened in 774 to 775 at Adomini. That's really odd. This year also, well, there's a spike in carbon, there's a spike in carbon 14. So I don't know if this is correlated with that. It's the same year, 774, 775, 774, 775. Let's make sure. Correlation doesn't lead to causation, but looks like there's like what else explains what is this? What are these two? I think this itself is named as this, but the individuals who were alive at that time says this year also appeared in the heavens a red crucifix after sunset. So are they talking about aurora lights? The Mercians and the men of Kent fought at Otford, and wonderful serpents were seen in the land of the South Saxons. The Saxons. Wonderful serpents. Okay. Yeah, okay, here we go. Red crucifix has been hypothesized to have been a supernova or aurora borealis. Anomalous thunderstorm. The common paradigm is that the event was caused by a solar or a consequence of events of, as often happened, from a very long solar flare, perhaps the strongest ever known, but still within the sun's abilities. According to a summary of the state of knowledge on radiocarbon dating in 2020, the spike is thought to have been caused by an extreme solar proton event. Another discussed scenario of the event origin involving a gamma ray burst. What? No, that's an altogether different thing, man. Appears unlikely because the event was also observed in isotopes. So yeah, no, that was, yeah, we were just talking about that. A similar event occurred in 993 or 994. Yeah, yeah. But it was only 60% as strong, as well as another event of 660 BC, which is what we were looking at, right? Yeah, it was here. Yeah, it's right here. Uh, Several other events at the same time are also suspected to have occurred during the Holocene epoch. This is carbon 14, the flux. So is there, what does that mean? CI flux and B flux. Is there some correlation of carbon building up in regards to how much carbon 14 building up, whatever this is, in regards to how much flux you have in the environment? BE, beryllium, carbon 14, beryllium. For these statistics, one may expect that such strong events occur once per tens of millennia, while weaker events may occur once per millennium or even century. Robbie Williams. I gotta go listen to Robbie Williams now. The event of 774 did not cause catastrophic consequences for life on Earth. Well, nothing was electrified. But had it happened in modern times, it might have produced catastrophic damage to modern technology, particularly communication and spaceborne navigation systems. In addition, a solar flare capable of producing the observed isotopic effect would pose considerable risk to astronauts. As of 2017, there is little understanding of C14 path variation because annual resolution measurements are only available for a few periods, such as in 2017, another extraordinary large C14 increase had been associated with 5480 BC event, but is not associated with a solar event because of its long duration, but rather to its unusually fast. But unusually fast ran minimum of solar activity. What? Mhm. What happened? in Okay, I'm getting tired. I gotta take a break. I'm not gonna go into this. This would not be the 6th millennium BC. 5480, but it has mention of 5480. Um, Abnormal level of solar activity. There's two mentions of this. Um, I think this was just the link that I was on. This would roughly be about 10 minutes. That's 3272, 5480. That's in and out. We're going with little information right now. Since, okay, something else happened. When solar activity is weak, the amount of carbon-14 in the atmosphere increases. Okay. This saw uniquely high amounts of carbon-14 in the wind that they actually indicating a new type of solar. So weak sun or a series of repeated strong solar flares. What we're saying, so C14 is more when solar activity is weak. So why would a strong solar flare also lead to it's contradictory? Unless the strong solar activity just um, think about that a little more. Okay, I have more questions. Alrighty, I don't want to close on this note, but the last thing is, I don't know, man. Last time I went to Robert M. Schoch's page on Wikipedia. Uh, it said he's a conspiracy theorist. So Wikipedia people were not kind to Mr. Shock, who is a American Associate Professor of Natural Sciences. I don't really know what that means, but let's take a look at his education. But just, uh, not to judge people based on what they've uh, studied in school. But BA in anthropology, BS in geology, 1979. Awarded MS and PhD degrees in geology and geophysics from Yale University, 1983. PhD in 1983. PhD dissertation, systematics, functional morphology and macroevolution of the extinct mammalian order. Okay. Now, Shock is best known for his fringe argument that the Great Sphinx of Giza is much older than conventionally thought, and that some kind of catastrophe was responsible for wiping out evidence of a significantly older unknown civilization. In 1991, Shock redated the monument to 10,000 to 5,000 BC. Mm, mm, I don't know, correlation doesn't lead to causation, but based on water erosion marks he identified on the Sphinx enclosure walls, he also based he also based and also based on findings from seismic studies around the base of the Sphinx and elsewhere on the planet. That theory from Shock, this one, is rejected by the archaeological community because of evidence contradicting his conclusions. Mark Lehner looked at the ways several structures in the area incorporate elements from older structures and based on the order in which they were constructed, concludes that the archaeological sequencing does not allow for a date older than the reign of Khafra. Archaeological geologists have also challenged the geological claims. Yeah, but the question is evidence, man. Why isn't there evidence? The structures that have been found in ancient Egypt, if there was a common, is he saying there was a common culture? Sundaland, what is that? That looks like Australia. Yeah. Where was I? uh, that guy looks like Hancock. I think he's been on Ancient Aliens. I've seen some episodes of Ancient Aliens. Yeah, yeah, Hancock. Chariots of the God. There, Daniken, which I have read, have not. I haven't read it. Um, George Murray, right? I don't really know you completely. Yes, Paul. Wow, this guy gets no love. Published works, Erosion, Reconstruction, Period Ontology, Baseline, Dislocation, Graph, Reconsideration, Methods. No, okay. That image just makes me understand what that means. So you see all the time giving false. So just try to understand what happened. Time to wrap up. Um, What's with the rocks? What is with the clovers? Environment science, fast. Inspiration. The role of outburst in our past and future. I think this was the book. Because if you Google Robert Shaw, solar. If you Google Robert Shaw solar, this is the first one that comes up. I have not read the book. Um, the role of solar outbursts in our past and future. I don't know. I don't know. Like I haven't looked at the evidence. I don't know what kind of map is. Like what is the evidence? But I don't know if this is like mapping up to the timelines as well. Were there ancient civilizations? We know there's a fair bit of recorded evidence that the Egyptian civilization was really sophisticated. It doesn't seem like there was anything special. Like I don't know things like the Baghdad battery, which is not Egyptian, it's more like Sumerian, but still. Uh, I don't know if there was some ancient technology being leveraged in that time scale. Who knows? It doesn't look like there's evidence of such things. Specific to the ancient Egyptian civilization, it looks like this is the question I spent a couple hours looking into, not more than that, but looks like you can indeed create colossal structures using the tools that were available to ancient Egyptians at that time, mostly copper tools. I was kind of wondering how you can cut through limestone using copper, but it has been demonstrated that you can indeed do that using the crude, based on our standards, technology at that time. That being said, the question, and as it relates to a civilization getting wiped out because of a cataclysmic event on a very short time frame, I don't know. I have not read this book. I have not uh, reviewed the data set, and I'm just trying to like I guess I'm trying to do justice, but I don't also know what happened here. I think there is evidence, and I'm going with very little information. Actually, I just saw a documentary on this on CBC, I think, that when it comes to the fall of the or gradual collapse of the Sumerian civilization, there was a climate angle to that. And but that was more so in the domains of the plains where the salt was washing down from the upstream, which made the land um, basically at that time unfit for agrarian use. And that, coupled with some of the other stressors, meant that, yeah. So, but that happened over a longer time stretch. It wasn't like days or weeks or months. Obviously, it was many years, if not longer, tens of years, maybe hundreds of years. But yeah, I don't know what the evidence suggests. If there was indeed a time in uh, recorded or well, however things are recorded in human history, where things would have. Um, I don't know. I shouldn't even talk about this because I don't know what Shock's research is. If he's saying it was a sudden thing, it was over a stretch of time. Um, these are some tall claims. Oh, yeah, um, uh, wow. Solar outburst ended the ice age. Uh, I don't know what this means. I don't know. Tall claims. I don't even know if I should do this. I don't want to take away from the subject. I don't want to. I don't want to. Yeah, Shock ever reads this. I don't want you to take this personally. What was this? 9,700 years ago. I'm just curious. So, fun fact: Robert Shock's website, harvard.com. That's a book review. Looks like you know, only brings up it's not 97, that's 660 BC. World. I don't see any evidence for maybe there was. I don't know. I just don't see them. Okay, if we just focus on this coronal mass ejection power enough to devastate modern society, I don't think like if you just focus on this and not all the other like like I don't want to be disrespectful, but like so Ethan Siegel is kind of sort of this opinion. The folks at Real Engineering, I think they are saying that the risks highlighted and that a CME is going to have on the grid itself are blown out of proportion. Something to this effect. I think they said this hyperinflated. I don't know who's right, right? I don't know who's right. But if you're looking at this moving kind of landscape, there's the Carrington event, there's the Quebec event, there are other events throughout history. There's fossilized core that has evidence of things happening in this history. At the very least, people in England are seeing auroras in the sky. Um, there may be other events like I shared. We just don't. We haven't looked at enough fossilized record and crunched through the data set on Earth or other planetary bodies to be able to make sense out of it. I think if you look at this objectively, depending on how uh, if these things line up, I made this picture earlier, going back to the article from Forbes. This one, I made a couple of points here. Well, the author has made them. I just highlighted them. So high energy heading directly for Earth. Magnetic field of the ejected material and the magnetic field of Earth are anti-aligned. That these 3 or 4 things are the recipe for maximum damage. This is what happens during the Carrington event, but at that time the electrical uh, grid was not as developed. We just focus on the grid or the electrical grid and the satellite communication system. Real engineering says the grid is not as big of a threat. I think they were saying the use of, I think it was microprocessors or some kind of sound like IoT device, which could indeed get a signal from some place and necessary interventions would be baked into the automation process of however the grid ought to structure. So you don't necessarily have to revamp the whole thing. You can just make necessary investments to have the intervention kick in. That still leaves the problem of the satellites. I think Siegel was sharing this, right? Siegel said you can have a safe orbit and you can maneuver the satellites into that safe orbit. But that still means that you need to have the necessary monitoring facilities on Earth and also across the different parts of the solar system. And it looks like the Lagrange points are ideal for something like that. it still leaves that big question of if this event happens and things are lined up in a way that may not be good for human life in particular, then what's going to happen? And that answer, I think, rests upon the preparatory the steps we take to prepare for such a thing. And I kind of spent a couple of minutes talking about what my energy field thoughts on that would be. Okay, I think this is going to be my last video for coronal mass ejection class 4 flares. Unless engaged, we will be standing down. We are civilians. And I think I covered quite a spectrum um, in my limited capacity, hypothesizing the creation of some kind of a shield. Maybe it can be a magnetic shield. Maybe you can harness the energy. It probably seems like it's not like an event that's happening every day, every week, every month, a couple of times a year for you to be able to harness that kind of energy. I think eventually it's quite inevitable that there's going to be energy generating stations somewhere in different points across the solar system. There's most probably going to be levers to build hydrogen depots because it looks like hydrogen is quite abundant in the galaxy, but that's a much longer time stretch. For local views on the planets and the colonial structures, probably when I don't know, maybe it depends right what time frame. Maybe other means of harnessing energy are devised. You have like functional fusion. You have the technology being developed for some other kind of propulsion systems can also be retrofitted to act as energy, generating harnessing energy. But yeah, I think hydrogen would be a key component. So I think that would be it. Hey, I gotta go. This is my last video on this topic. Unless we are engaged as civilians, we're welcome. We're very happy to jump in and contribute our energies, help define the problem, create some proof of concept, or with the ideation aspect. Lucid is is really adept on the solid work side of things and very effective at synthesizing information and research and turning it into functional prototypes. This is what we've done historically for the past couple of months, and we would be very glad and willing to continue that, working with DoD, other military. Well, everything would fall under the DoD like umbrella, NATO led institutions, and it has to be for something like this. It has to have visibility and approval from the necessary institutions, but also like I've said in the previous content, it has to have a global approval system, because anything you're putting in this orbit, I'm not talking about satellites, but anything project up in a larger scale has to inevitably, you have to have everyone on board. Otherwise, I've already shared my thoughts on how that could cause problems down the road with my uneducated guests. And yeah, happy to assist. Happy to assist in a global level. Yeah, I'm not going to do my own commentary. I do think that the future is wonderful, and I see all humans cooperating to make better surroundings for the future. and I believe that is possible. There's a lot of challenges and stresses. Uh, I would say these are complex, many complex conversations, but I believe humans are inherently good species. Yes, we are monkeys, and yes, there's not a lot of difference between our brain and chimpanzee brain. But I think there's a very high probability if humans are seeing somebody else suffer that we would want to do something to help address that. And I particularly think that in an outcome where there's more likelihood that there's going to be abundance, then in theory at least, there should be that much more of a probability for humans to be assisting each other. So as the world becomes better, then we need to think about more and more about the future because we now have an abundance of resources and of time because automation allows you to do that. And I believe that time should be invested towards continually enabling the future. And I think uh, let's be 100% honest, whether we are involved or not with some of these projects, I still hope and truly, truly wish that these projects continue so that everyone benefits. And I believe that going to space is going to be absolutely crucial for our safety and our long-term well-being. So that's my CME talk for the day. Wow, it's 2.5 hours. I take a break. Have a great day.